The Whistler and the Shoes. The same pattern continued through the end of the summer and well into autumn. Rudy did his best to survive the Hitler Youth. Max did his push-ups and made his sketches. Liesel found newspapers and wrote her words on the basement wall. It's also worthy of mention that every pattern has at least one small bias, and one day it will tip itself over, or fall from one page to the other. In this case, the dominant factor was Rudy, or at least Rudy and a freshly fertilized sports field. Late in October, all appeared to be usual. A filthy boy was walking down Himmel Street, and within a few minutes his family would expect his arrival, and he would lie that everyone in his Hitler Youth Division was given extra drills in the field. His parents would even expect some laughter. They didn't get it. Today, Rudy was all out of laughter and lies. On this particular Wednesday, when Liesel looked more closely, she could see that Rudy Steinle was shirtless, and he was furious. "What happened?" she asked as he trudged past. He reversed back and held out the shirt. "Smell it," he said. "What? Are you deaf?" I said, "Smell it." Reluctantly, Liesel leaned in and caught a ghastly whiff of the brown garment. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, is that—" The boy nodded. "It's on my chin, too. My chin. I'm lucky I didn't swallow it." Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The field at Hitler Youth just got fertilized. He gave his shirt another half-hearted, disgusted appraisal. "It's cow manure, I think." "Did what's-his-name Deutscher know it was there?" "He says he didn't, but he was grinning." Jesus, Mary, and could you stop saying that? What Rudy needed at this point was a victory. He had lost in dealing with Victor Kemmel. He had endured problem after problem at the Hitler Youth. All he wanted was a small scrap of triumph, and he was determined to get it. He continued home, but when he reached the concrete step, he changed his mind, and he came slowly, purposefully, back to the girl. Careful and quiet, he spoke. "You know what would cheer me up?" Liesel cringed. "If you think I'm going to, in that state," and he seemed disappointed. "No, not that." He sighed and stepped closer. "Something else." After a moment's thought, he raised his head just a touch. "Look at me. I'm filthy. I stink like a cow shit or dog shit, whatever your opinion, and as usual, I'm absolutely starving." He paused. "I need a win, Liesel. Honestly." Liesel knew. She'd have gone closer, but for the smell of him. Stealing. They had to steal something. No, they had to steal something back. It didn't matter what. It just needed to be soon. "Just me and you this time," Rudy suggested. "No Kemmels, no Schmeckles, just me and you." The girl couldn't help it. Her hands itched and her pulse split and her mouth smiled all at the same time. "Sounds good." It's agreed then, and although he tried not to, Rudy could not hide the fertilized grin that grew on his face. "Tomorrow?" And Liesel nodded. "Tomorrow." Their plan was perfect, but for one thing. They had no idea where to start. Fruit was out. Rudy snubbed his nose at onions and potatoes, and they drew the line at another attempt on Otto Sturm and his bike full of farm produce. Once was immoral. Twice was completely bastardry. "So where the hell do we go?" Rudy asked. "How should I know? This was your idea, wasn't it?" "That doesn't mean you shouldn't think a little too. I can't think of everything." "Psh, you can barely think of anything." They argued on as they walked through town. On the outskirts, they witnessed the first of the farms and the trees standing like emaciated statues. The branches were gray, and when they looked up at them, there was nothing but ragged limbs and empty sky, and Rudy spat. They walked back through Monking, making suggestions. "What about Frau Diller?" "What about her?" "Maybe if we say Heil Hitler and then steal something, we'll be all right." After roaming Munich Street for an hour or so, the daylight was drawing to a close, and they were on the verge of giving up. "It's pointless," Rudy said. "I'm even hungrier now than I've ever been. I'm starving, for Christ's sake." He walked another dozen steps before he stopped and looked back. "What's with you?" Because now Liesel was standing completely still, and that moment of realization was strapped to her face. Why hadn't she thought of it before? "What is it?" Rudy was becoming impatient. "Salmage, what's going on?" At that very moment, Liesel was presented with a decision. Could she truly carry out like she was thinking? Could she really seek revenge on a person like this? Could she despise someone this much? And she began walking in the opposite direction. Rudy caught up. She slowed a little in the vain hope of achieving a little more clarity. After all, guilt was already there. It was moist. The seed was already bursting into a dark leaf flower, and she weighed up whether she could really go through with this. At a crossroad, she stopped. "I know a place." They went over the river, and they made their way up the hill. On Grandestrasse, they took in the splendor of the houses. The front doors glowed with polish, at the roof tiles sat like toupees, combed to perfection. The walls and windows were manicured. The chimneys were almost breathed out smoke rings. And Rudy planted his feet. "The mayor's house?" Liesel nodded seriously. A pause. "They fired my mama." When they angled toward it, Rudy asked just how in God's name they were going to get inside, but Liesl knew. Local knowledge, she answered. Local? But they were able to see through the window in the library at the far end. She was greeted with shock. The window was closed. Well, Rudy asked. Liesl swiveled slowly and hurried off. Not today, she said. Rudy laughed. I knew it. He caught up. I knew it, you filthy soundmensch. You couldn't get in there even if you had the key. Do you mind? She quickened even more and brushed aside Rudy's commentary. We just have to wait for the right opportunity. Internally, she shrugged away from the kind of the gladness that the window was closed. She berated herself. Why, Liesl, she asked. Why did you have to explode when they fired Mama? Why couldn't you just keep your big mouth shut? For all you know, the mayor's wife is now completely reformed after you yelled and screamed at her. Maybe she straightened herself out. She's picked herself up. Maybe she'll never let herself shiver in that house again, and the window will be shut forever. You stupid soundmensch. A week later, however, on the 5th visit to the upper part of Molking, it was there. The open window breathed a slice of air in. That was all it would take. It was Rudy who stopped first. He tapped Liesl in the ribs with the back of his hand. Is that window, he whispered, open? The eagerness in his voice leaned from the mouth like a forearm onto Liesl's shoulder. Jawohl, she answered. It sure is. And how her heart began to heat. On each previous occasion when they found the window clamped firmly shut, Liesl's outer disappointment had masked a ferocious relief. Would she have the neck to go in? And who and what, in fact, was she going in for? To Rudy? To locate some food? No. The repugnant truth was this. She didn't care about the food. Rudy, no matter how hard he tried to resist the idea, was secondary to her plan. It was the book she wanted, The Whistler. She wouldn't tolerate having given it to her by a lonely, pathetic old woman, but stealing it, on the other hand, seemed a little more acceptable. Stealing it, in a sick kind of sense, was like earning it. The light was changing the blocks of shade. The pair of them gravitated toward the immaculate, bulky house, and they rustled their thoughts. You hungry? Rudy asked. Liesl replied, starving. For a book. Look, a light just came on upstairs. I see it. You still hungry, soundmensch? They laughed nervously for a moment before going through the motions of who should go in and stand watch. As the male in the operation, Rudy felt like he should be the aggressor, but it was obvious that Liesl knew this place. It was she who was going in. She knew what was on the other side of the window. She said, it has to be me. Liesl closed her eyes tightly. She compelled herself to remember, to see visions of the mayor and his wife. She watched and gathered friendship with Elsa Herman and made sure to see it kicked in the shins and left by the wayside. And it worked. She detested them. They scouted the street and crossed the yard silently, and now they were crouched beneath the slit in the window on the ground floor, and the sound of their breathing amplified. Here, Rudy said, give me your shoes. You'll be quieter. Without complaint, Liesl undid the worn black laces and left the shoes on the ground, and she rose up, and Rudy gently opened the window, enough for Liesl to climb through. The noise of it passed overhead like a low-flying plane. The room itself was the way it always was. Liesl, in the dusty dimness, shrugged off the feelings of nostalgia, and she crept forward, allowed herself and her eyes to adjust. The food, Rudy reminded her. Find the food! And cigarettes, if you can. Both items, however, were the last things on her mind. She knew the one thing she wanted, and its exact position. She made it to the Whistler's usual place on the shelf, but it was not there. A slight gap was in its place, and from above she heard footsteps. The light, Rudy whispered. The words were shoved through the window. It's out! Scheisse! They're coming downstairs! There was a giant length of moment when the eternity of the split-second decision, her eyes scanned the room and she could see the Whistler sitting patiently on the mayor's desk. Hurry up, Rudy warned her. She went over, picked up the book, made her way cautiously out. Head first, she climbed from the window, managing to land on her feet again, feeling the pang of pain once more in her ankles. Come on, run, Rudy said. And once around the corner they rode back through the river and Munich Street, and she stopped over to bend and recover, and her body folded in the middle. Rudy felt the same. When he looked over, he saw the book under her arm, and he struggled to speak. What's with the book? The darkness was filling up now. Liesl panted the air. Unfortunately, Rudy could smell it. She was lying. He cocked his head, told her exactly what he felt was a fact. You didn't go in for food, did you? You've got what you wanted. Liesl straightened, was overcome with the sickness of the realization. She looked at Rudy's feet, then at his hands and the ground all around him. What? He asked. What is it? Saukarl, she accused him. Where are my shoes? Rudy's face witnessed, which left her in no doubt. They're back at the house, she suggested, aren't they?